Duval. Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's Toilets and Titles. It's another off-season breakdown bonus episode. As you can tell, this is the Jaguars episode. I don't know why, but the Jaguars show up for our Jaguars episodes. We, the fans out there, like you guys are thirsty for more content. We appreciate your support. We get it every Jaguars episode of any kind, or even if we just talk a lot about the Jaguars. You guys have an incredible fan base, so we decided to bring on some incredible guests. The first one I'm going to introduce has been on a few times already, Demetrius Harvey. He's a reporter for the Jags reporter for @Jags.com, and I'm going to pull it up at the bottom once he starts talking because it's the Twitter handle is literally @Jags.com. So kind of a funny way of putting it, but Demetrius, how's it going, my man?
Nothing much, man. I'm just excited for the rest of this offseason to sort of finish out, and then we can actually get into some football.
That's right. It's getting close, man. We're end of May, so just a day or two away from June, and wow, it's almost here. Wrong button. All right. Dylan.
I'll say I'm not touching nothing over here, Justin.
It was you last time. I have to mess it up this time. Dylan, my man, how's it going? I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, and please correct me because I feel really bad if this is true, but you're a friend of George's, is that correct?
Yes.
And you're willing to admit that. All right. So, hey, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about the Big D podcast? We talked about it a little bit before the show. I'm kind of interested to see where they can find you at.
Hit me, Big D Podcast, Funky Spectrum Sports. George has been on when we talk Dolphins, 49ers, NFL Draft. I mean, George is a guy I like following.
Yeah, he's all right. I like to give him time, give him a hard time, but he's all right, I guess. But
I'll be honest with you. Week 1's got a little extra intrigue because his Dolphins and my Jags.
Yep. That's nice. All right, George. Do you have anything bad to say about Dylan?
No, I don't speak bad about our guests when they come on our show. I save that for when we go on their show, Justin. You should be a professional and know that by now. But I mean,
all right. Hey, speaking of being professional, Demetrius, what are you working on right now? Like, where we can be able to find your next piece of work?
Yeah, I mean, Jacksonville.com. Not necessarily anything in particular right now. We're just going through it, off-season sort of stuff. The Jags have their next OTA on Monday, which is June 3rd. So, we're going to have some stuff coming out from that. I just wrote a huge feature on Foye Oluwakin and sort of his journey as a multi-sport athlete. I kind of took a deep dive into how that sort of transpired in the NFL. I wish I could have done a little bit more research and got a little bit more data to put out there. But, Jacksonville.com, you can find all my coverage there. @Demetrius82 on Twitter. That's pretty much where I stay.
Outstanding. So since you are so focused on the offseason, obviously the biggest portion of the offseason, you guys, I'm going to start with the wide receiving group because you guys lose Ridley, which was kind of a big loss, but then you gain Brian Thomas in the draft, which is a pretty big gain. You have other pieces there at wide receiver. You get Gabe Davis. You have Devin Duvernay comes in, who has some experience in the NFL, and I think that backup role is kind of perfect for him. But I don't know. You tell me, Demetrius, about that wide receiving position. Are you excited compared to what you had last season?
Yeah, no, I mean it's a better group in the sense of I think that this is a younger group. It's a group that's going to be able to grow with Trevor Lawrence. Calvin Ridley was about to turn 30 in December. Don't get me wrong, he would have been great to have back. Obviously, the Jaguars really wanted him back. But it just doesn't work out that way. Sometimes money is completely different for some players than it is for others. So, you take the money in Tennessee, and then the Jaguars said, okay, and they went ahead and drafted Brian Thomas Jr. I think the additions of Gabe Davis, who basically will be replacing Zay Jones, and then the addition of Brian Thomas, I think that those are sort of upgrades, definitely for the Zay Jones position, and then it could be an upgrade for Calvin Ridley if you think about it in terms of longevity. So, yeah, right now I think that the Jags are in a better spot at their wide receiver position. They're going to be more vertical passing down the field this year. I know that that's sort of a mantra of every single team. They just want to score score quickly. But I really do feel like they have the skill set. So you have Christian Kirk in the slot, who's more of like a vertical slot. You have Brian Thomas, who's a vertical deep threat player. You have Gabe Davis, who's also a vertical threat, but just in a different way. He's not the fastest guy, but he still gets past and gets down the field and gets behind the defense. So, he's another guy that can sort of take the top off. And I just think that that's sort of what they are looking for, what they want. And I think it really speaks to Trevor's skill sets.
Right on. Dylan, do you have any concerns with the wide receiving group, or are you pretty much right in line with Demetrius here?
I do have concerns because rookie wide receivers, particularly first-round wide receivers, can be hit or miss. I mean, we all saw what Quentin Johnston did last year, or maybe didn't do for the Chargers last year. He couldn't catch water if he fell off the boat. But Demetrius, I've got one for you. Who does Brian Thomas remind you of? I mean, because we saw what kind of big plays he did at LSU. I mean,
sort of like if I had to pick just a comparison shot in the dark, Martavis Bryant, if you guys remember that guy, long time ago for the Raiders. Yeah, he's a deep threat fantasy football star for a little bit. So I do think that he's a guy that could sort of, play that similar role to a Martavis Bryant. I think that's his floor. If you want to go ceiling, T. Higgins is another example. I would have a big, tall, long wide receiver who's fast, who can be physical. He still has to develop some of that game. I think that's his ceiling. Floor, Martavis Bryant. I think that those kind of makes sense. But I think, to your point, Dylan, you're right. It for rookie receivers, for whatever reason, is the same as like tight ends, cornerbacks, and guys like that. For some reason they struggle when they first come into the NFL. So it might take a little bit for Brian to get going. But to me, I think that longevity makes more sense to think about, just because this isn't the last year of Trevor Lawrence. This isn't the last year of Doug Peterson. They don't have to necessarily win the Super Bowl right now. So I think they'll be fine.
I think Brian Thomas got a little Brandon Ayuk in him. I mean, maybe a little bigger than Brandon Ayuk, but a similar kind of yak receiver.
It's possible.
Maybe he could have a little Brandon Ayuk next to him if those conversations out there in San Francisco keep going.
Yeah, that'll never happen.
Yeah, no, it won't.
That's done.
I want to talk a little bit about the tight ends. Demetrius mentioned Evan Ingram. Last year, he had a career year in receptions, yards, and almost tied his career touchdown reception. His career high was 6. He only had 4. What can we expect from Evan Ingram this year? I think the Jaguars had something like 250 vacated targets or something, so over 200 vacated targets with the departures of the wide receivers that left last year. What can we expect with Evan Ingram? Is he going to be the same focal point of the offense that he was last year?
I think so. I think he might even be even more this season, because you're not going to have a Calvin Ridley who sort of demands the attention that he does, especially when you look early in the season. They were just targeting him all over the place. So Evan, in my opinion, he's the new safety valve. Him and Christian Kirk sort of play that similar role in the middle of the field. So I just think that for Evan, in terms of how Doug Peterson likes to run his offense, he's always going to be a focal point. Will he have 116 catches again this year? I don't know about that, but I do think that his yards and in terms of his production is going to remain the same. It might even increase, because the Jaguars were one of the worst teams in the red zone last season. And if you think about how they sort of manipulated their wide receiver room with the Gabe Davis, with Brian Thomas, a little bit bigger wide receivers. Gabe Davis is a red zone machine. I do think that that's going to help them out a lot, and perhaps give Evan Ingram some more plays in the red zone too. So I think that there's a chance that he will basically remain the same.
Seemed like the Jags were the kings of almost touchdowns last year. Almost.
Yeah, and Evan Ingram did a great job last season of making me believe that Evan Ingram was actually good. Like he had a hell of a season. So before that, I wasn't a believer, but now, like for fantasy purposes, I'm even trying to collect more of them. So he definitely looks good in that offense, and a lot of that is Doug Peterson, third year as your head coach. That connection with Trevor Lawrence, it looked like from the outside looking in, because I'm not a Jaguars fan. That's very noted. But from the outside looking in, it looked like there was a little bit of a backpedal for T-Law last season. But now this being the third year in Peterson's offense and that whole entire coaching staff, do we see an increase coming, like a bounce back year for Trevor Lawrence? And Dylan, I'll start with you on this one.
Well, I'm just glad Trevor's healthy because he played with 57 injuries toward the end of last season. But this is a proven year for Trevor Lawrence because, I mean, last year the Jaguars were everybody's pick to win the South, and Houston outdid Jacksonville from 2022 and 2023. Now it's a harder division. The Texans haven't Steph Diggs. The Colts with a very good head coach in Shane Steichen, Anthony Richardson with Pittman and JT, and then Tennessee added Calvin Ridley and really good offensive mind Brian Callahan. So the division is much harder than it's been in years past. Well, 9-8 could win the AFC South. 9-8 is not going to win this division anymore.
Yeah. Yep, that's fair.
Yeah, no, I mean, I sort of agree with that sentiment where, it's not going to win the division anymore. It's clearly a more experienced group. CJ Stroud's entering his second year. That D'Amico Ryans has the Texans humming. I think that Anthony Richardson is going to be a really good quarterback in this league. I saw someone say that he was their number one fantasy football quarterback this year, which to me sounds crazy. But if you think about it, I mean, it could be. If you just think about his rushing yards, the potential, the production there. They got Josh Downs, they got Michael Pittman, and they drafted A.D. Mitchell. There's potential there. But I just think that this division is pretty strong. It's going to be tough for the Jaguars. And as far as Trevor Lawrence goes, absolutely, this is a prove-it year to me. And this is probably a longer conversation for another day, but to me, Trevor has proven himself in the league. I think that he's a very good quarterback. I don't think that there's much really to think about as far as an extension comes. He's going to get his extension, whether people are happy with it or not. It's going to happen. So I do think that he's in a weird situation where right now, I think the spotlight's on him. He does have an issue with turnovers. I think that's his number one issue. If there's any one criticism of him, it would be that. Other than that, in terms of how he played last year, I thought that he was playing great up until the injury against the Bengals. I thought that he was playing a great game against Cincinnati, actually, before he got hurt. And then once he got hurt there, that was kind of it. And he had been hurt since week 6. So, yeah, I think that last year was a little bit of a fluke in terms of his numbers go. It's not going to look good, obviously, when you miss that much practice time. I think he practiced like maybe once full within the last 7 or 8 weeks of the season. You're just never going to play that well as a quarterback, as a young quarterback in this league when you don't practice. So, I do think there is some charitability to give on that side of things. But other than that, I do feel like, Trevor, the Jaguars, as far as their ascension, it just seems like they're still heading in the right direction.
Well, as the resident Colts fan here, I can tell you guys you have nothing to worry about. I am so down on Anthony Richardson. I was before they drafted him. Even before they draft, like you talking about all this crazy awesome potential that's there, it's always going to be potential.
It's there
until
though.
He can stay on the field. Yeah, the potential is definitely there. But he's got to stay on the field, and he's not had a history of that. I mean, yeah, you guys are from Florida. You even saw it in college. Like,
yeah,
all the time.
I covered him for one season, and that was the name of the game. It was one of those situations where he just needed to stay healthy. Couldn't stay healthy. His hamstring. He was doing backflips in the hotel, getting hurt. So I do think there is something to the injury stuff, and if he can't protect himself, then he's never going to have a successful career. But if he does, man, I'm telling you, this is probably one of the most talented kids in the league.
Yeah, I agree. But they also said the same thing about him back in high school. It's always going to be that way. He's always hurt. But anyway, I'm going to let George take away with the next question here.
So my question is regarding Travis Etienne, and not necessarily just him, but like the entire running back group in general. Last year there was a lot of, and I don't know if it was just fantasy buzz, because like Justin said earlier, we're primarily a fantasy football podcast, even though these shows are more geared towards actual the NFL, not fantasy. But there was a really lot of buzz around Tank Bigsby last year. People were expecting him to play a much larger role in the offense than he actually did, and when it actually came time with the lights on and the game started, like that man was nowhere to be found. He come in for a series or two the entire game, but that's it. Like everything else was Travis Etienne. Is he taking a step forward, and what can we expect out of that running back room? Because I know they also drafted another running back in the 5th round.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember specifically, I think we talked about Tank Bigsby last year and sort of how that might play out, and I was pretty high on him, and I still am, and I think that what we all did as reporters, were covering the Jaguars, we're seeing, okay, Tank Bigsby looks pretty good in this practice. Oh, he's doing really well, so that's what we're reporting. That's where the hype comes from. He gets a touchdown in the preseason. I think he might have fumbled one time, but no one really cared too much. But then when you get to the regular season and it sort of, gets rolling, all of a sudden, it's Travis Etienne on 73% of the snaps in total offense. And then Tank Bigsby's getting, I think, 12% or something. So yeah, it's definitely a big and Jaguars coaches sort of know what happened, and they understand that they probably put too much on Travis's shoulders. I think that what it boiled down to was Tank just wasn't ready. He's not seeing the holes correctly. He's making some critical mistakes, not able to pass protect. So when you're not able to do any of those things as a rookie, they're not going to put you out there. So Travis sort of got the load. But from what we've seen and what we've heard over the last few days and over the last week from Doug Peterson and Press Taylor, it's that they want to get Tank Bigsby the ball. They know that they need to take the load off of Travis Etienne, and they feel very highly about Tank and his role in the offense. They even admitted that perhaps there were times where they just stuck with Travis a little bit too long. So to answer your question in a roundabout way, I think that the increase is coming, absolutely. As far as the entirety of the running back depth, I feel like it hasn't really changed. Dearness Johnson is in. Keelan Robinson is mostly going to be used as a kick returner. I wouldn't expect him to really get much play as a running back. I think that Dearness Johnson sort of is that special teams player still, but can come in and is that veteran backup. But it is the Travis Etienne and then maybe a few ticks down Tank Bigsby sort of backfield.
Dylan, you got anything you want to add?
Yeah, and plus, I mean, Etienne's not a big guy. You don't want him taking a lot of wear and tear. And I mean, unless you name Christian McCaffrey, it's generally running back by committee. I mean, one guy might get 60, 70%, so maybe we see Etienne get 60% of the workload and Tank 20, 25%. Is that outrageous?
It's not too bad. It's not too outrageous, I don't think.
I don't think so either.
And the talent for Etienne is there that so much that if you're viewing this for fantasy purposes, even if it is 25 or even 30%, Etienne should still be taken low into the first round area for fantasy purposes. Now, Dylan, I know that since you're able to get along with George and still not talk bad about him, that you're not much of a trash talker, but as a Colts fan, I have to say that I've really thoroughly enjoyed these last 2 seasons of the Luke Fortner experiment. Unfortunately, he's gone, and you guys get an actual center in there. The Pro Football Network has the Jaguars listed 21st overall on their rankings list headed into the 2024 season. I want you to tell the camera exactly why Pro Football Network is wrong. You can trash talk Pro Football Network on their ranking of the Jaguars here, even though I get along with those guys over there.
What kind of buffoon? So what teams in front? So what teams on front of the Jaguars?
Well, they've got the Ravens they've got the Ravens at 20, the Bills at 19, the Niners at 18, the Broncos at 17. So yeah, those are the next 4.
So Bo Nix is in front of us. He hasn't played. So Bo Nix hasn't played the college down yet. The Broncos on front of us. What kind of buffoon?
The offensive
line rank.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. I was so confused for a second. I was like, 49ers.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was talking about Luke Fortner. I thought it was implied. I meant to say, if I didn't say it, I meant to say the offensive line is ranked 21st. Are they wrong?
I would hope so, because last year it seemed like every time Travis Etienne ran, he went nowhere. I mean, the offensive line can't get any worse, right? I mean, they added the center from Buffalo. I mean, Cam Robinson's back after missing the first 4 games. Actually, Cam played pretty well for most of last year, right?
Yeah, I mean, I thought he played well. Yeah.
And plus, Jackson's got some depth. Signed Cleveland, who they acquired from Minnesota. So, I mean, Jackson's finally got some depth, which seemingly everybody needs with how often linemen go down now.
And I thought, in terms of the 21st rank, I think that's actually pretty good. I think that's pretty fair, especially heading into the season. It just is what it is. They were not able to protect Trevor as often as they needed to, although their pass protection was better than the run game. The run game was abysmal. I mean, I was surprised that they're not ranked 32nd in each category, just because when you watch the game, you can just visualize how ineffective it is. It doesn't matter if they're getting 5 yards here and there, or if they're they rush for 4 yards per carry this game, rather than 3.2. It looked the same. It was ineffective. It didn't really get the offense going. They had to go more horizontal. There's a big reason why everybody keeps harping on it. There's a big reason why everybody harped on Luke Fortner enough to where the Jaguars had to go out and sign Mitch Morse, who's coming off of another year where he's had concussions and things of that nature, and they're really trying to bank on him actually being the answer. They always talk about continuity and how they weren't able to play with every offensive lineman at the same time, all 5. That's something that's very important to them. Cam Robinson, Ezra Cleveland, Mitch Morse / Luke Fortner, Brandon Sheriff, and then Anton Harrison. Those 5 guys have to play together for more than 1 or 2 games. So I do think that the offensive line is going to improve. I think that they have nowhere to go but up in terms of the run game. In terms of the pass game, I do think they're going to remain consistent as long as everybody just stays healthy. So 21st ranked, honestly, that's pretty dead on to me.
All right. I like it. George, you got a defensive question?
Well, not necessarily defensive question. I'm going to take this. This is really the only team you can actually pose this question to, believe it or not.
Oh, okay.
What are the odds the Jacksonville Jaguars actually become the first team that is home-based overseas? It's like they got 3 back-to-back games in London this year. Every year they've got at least 1 or 2 games overseas in England. I know that they've got stadium renovations coming up where they're going to be displaced. Do you guys really think that the NFL will do like a test run with an overseas team, and that being the Jaguars, while their stadium's getting rebuilt?
I don't think so. I mean, personally, they're not going to. The NFL, if they want to put a team in London and have them play for a year, they would have already done it. Or if they have all the logistics, they would have already sort of had that out there. In terms of their playing schedule, they do have the 2 games back to back in London. One's home technically, and one's away. So it's sort of one home game being taken away. As far as the renovations go, that sort of secures them in Jacksonville for the next 30 years. But as far as London, I think that they're always going to play 1 home game in London a year. They're not going to play more than 1, and they might play an extra game at an away game. They might have, when you talk about that 2028 season where they're going to be playing away from Everbank Stadium, they could play more than 2. They could play 3 games in London, sort of do like a month stretch there, play a couple games in Orlando, and then maybe a couple games wherever. But yeah, I don't foresee any possibility of the Jags ever playing a full season in London. I'd be floored.
I just hope we don't become like the Saints in 05 after Katrina destroyed the Superdome, where we play home games in Orlando, home games in Gainesville, home games in London.
Well, I mean, that's probably what it's going to be. But I mean, for every time I people talk to me about that, I tell them it's just 8 weekends out of the year. It's just 8 weekends, and then you're done, and then you get this shiny new amazing stadium. I don't think anyone's going to complain after that.
I personally, I hope that they do play in Orlando, and that's just me being selfish because Orlando's only like 40 minutes from me. So I don't mind going over to catch a Jaguars game every once in a while if it's only a 40-minute drive.
It'll be at Camping World, though. I don't know if that'll help or that'll hurt your chances of going.
No. I've been to Camping World numerous
like it?
times.
A lot of people complain. I haven't been there personally, but a lot of people have complained, and they're like, "Oh, it's in a bad area. It's not a good stadium." Blah blah blah. You know, I was like, "Oh."
The stadium is not a good stadium. They definitely need to put a little money into it and upgrade it. But it's a decent stadium. It's big. It's big enough for an NFL stadium for sure. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, should be cool.
Tell you what, George, I'll ask the defensive question because then I want you to be able to ask your final question you'd like to ask. So
I have two final questions.
Okay, that's fine. So we have a final question and a second to final question from George. But before we do that, I want to take a quick timeout real quick just to say, guys, make sure you're checking us out. Patreon.com/Toilets and Titles. Please go there and help support the team. We've got a lot going on for Canton this August for the Fantasy Football Expo. A lot of expenses going out. We got live Frankenstein drafts. This here really soon. I don't want to say this coming Tuesday. I got to confirm it with the coach, but I believe this coming Tuesday I'm going to be dropping a little bit of some hints on the Frankenstein Listener League draft that's going to be coming up. John and I have been in the laboratory, and we've been creating some more monsters, and we have new monster cards coming out, so you can draft more than just Freddy Krueger ahead of Patrick Mahomes if you want. So a lot of good things coming down the pipeline in that. But this defensive question I have for you guys is obviously defense seems to be a focal point that the team had going into the offseason. I'm not completely up to date on necessarily the free agent signings that they had, but I do know that they did some work in the NFL draft, taking looks like 5 different defensive players in the draft. So do you feel like they filled all the needs, filled all the holes, and are we going to see an improvement in this defense? Because before the show, Dylan and George were both talking about whose defense was worse between the Dolphins and the Jaguars, and it was funny to watch. So Demetrius,
Dylan said Jacksonville's going to score 40 on us week 1, and I said that's fine because we're going to score 60 on you.
I wouldn't be surprised, man. I'm not gonna lie. That game might be a shootout with Tyreek Hill and Trevor Lawrence. Yeah, I could see it. The defense did undergo a ton of changes. So, I mean, basically the entire defensive coaching staff was fired. They kept Bill Shuey and the outside linebackers coach, and then they kept I think the assistant defensive line coach Roy Segrist or something like that. So they basically overhauled this completely because they determined, hey, this staff isn't getting what they wanted out of them. As far as the free agents go, they signed Ron Darby, they signed Eric Armstead, they went out and signed Darnell Savage. Those are the 3 defenders. I think those are the 3 primary guys that they signed defensively. And so they're going to come in and pretty much start right away. Eric Armstead's going to start inside, obviously. Ron Darby probably will start outside at cornerback, so that addresses the Darius Williams exodus. And then Darnell Savage is the interesting piece because he's going to be playing some slot in Jacksonville, whereas before he was more of a deep safety for the Packers. I know in college he dabbled kind of everywhere. So it's going to be interesting to see how it sort of plays out. To me, the defense they've done enough. Mason Smith is who they drafted, Jordan Jefferson, Jarian Jones, DeAndre Prince, and Miles Cole at the end, which is just like a practice squad player or a potential developmental player. You never know what he can turn into. But those first 4 guys are going to be counted on, especially this season where Mason Smith is probably going to be put in the backup role to Eric Armstead right away. Jarian Jones could start at nickel depending on what they do with Darnell Savage, or play extensively. So I do think the defense is much improved. I did think that they probably did need a change in coaching because they just weren't able to get it for whatever reason. It doesn't mean that Mike Caldwell was just that bad of a coach. It just means that he wasn't able to get what they needed to out of the group. So, I could totally see them going into this season a lot more sound, a lot more fundamentally sound, and sort of just getting back to the basics of a solid defense. Doesn't mean they're going to be amazing, but better than busting coverages against the Browns and Joe Flacco and things of that nature.
Yeah, we don't talk good about the Browns on this show.
Yeah, and don't forget Derrick Henry running for 8,000 yards every week.
Which was terrible because, I was told by someone that their game plan going in, the Jaguars' game plan was to stop Derrick Henry and stop the third down screen passes, and they didn't do either one of those things. They couldn't do either one. And so that was sort of the reason, or to me, that was sort of the reason why the defensive coaching staff was just cut out, because they couldn't do the things that they actually went in trying to do.
Yeah, Demetrius, were you ultimately surprised? Because I thought for like 4 months the Jags were going to take a corner back at 17. Were you ultimately surprised that Jags didn't take a corner and took Brian Thomas after moving back?
I wouldn't say I was surprised because I knew they were in on wide receivers. I had heard that they were going to try to trade up for a guy like Rome Odunze if they had fallen. But obviously Rome was never going to get past the Bears, so I wasn't necessarily surprised. What I was a little surprised about was when they did trade down, Terrion Arnold was still on the board. I thought, okay, you got to take Terrion Arnold. They didn't do it, and then he was still on the board at pick 23. And they still went with Brian Thomas. I was only slightly surprised about that. I didn't have them pegged to pick Brian over Terrion, but I think when you think about it, it sort of makes sense. They went with the guy that they know could replace Calvin Ridley, and they probably really wanted to draft Mason Smith in the second round. And if you do that, if you go Terrion Arnold and then Mason Smith, all of a sudden your third round is going to have to be one of the wide receivers, probably like a Jermaine Burton. So I think that would have been too much of a downgrade, so they just went with the formula they did.
All right, and time for I'm just going to do one final question this evening. Dylan, I'm going to start with you. Demetrius, you'll go next. Demetrius, you have a caveat. You cannot use the same player that Dylan takes. Okay, you have to take a totally different player. Dylan, you could take any player in the NFL, not a quarterback. So no quarterbacks are available. You could take any player in the NFL, offense, defense, special teams, whatever you want, from any team. Doesn't matter if they fit in the salary cap. Doesn't matter, what you'd have to trade to get them. You could just, like the little robot machine, you go down with the claw, you pick the player, and you're dropping them on the Jaguars. Who do you pick and why?
So I pick a player not on the Jaguars and put him on the team.
Yep, yeah. Any player you want, regardless of salary cap implications, regardless of what it would cost to trade. You're getting a free player from the league. You get your pick of the litter outside of quarterbacks. I got tired of hearing Patrick Mahomes.
You know what? I'm going to pick somebody from Patrick Mahomes' team, but it's not Travis Kelce. I'm gonna pick probably, now that Aaron Donald is gone, the best defensive lineman in the NFL, Chris Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's solid. But now you can't take him.
That's a great pick. I wouldn't go that route only because he's like I think he's 30 or.
But 1 year, if it will for the next 4 or 5 years, I'd probably go. I don't know if I would take the only problem. If it were for the next 3 or 4 years, I mean, the problem is all the pass rushers are like in their mid-20s now, late 20s.
I know I have a thought here.
Maybe Micah Parsons then.
All right. Okay. If you go Parsons, I'm assuming that would be your long-term player. That would have been mine too, probably. But Justin Jefferson, I think that he's the best wide receiver in the league. I don't really care who else you have at wide receiver. Christian Kirk's 28, about 29. I know I keep talking about ages, but I really think in the future when I think about team building. So Justin Jefferson I think is like 24 years old, maybe the same age or a little bit younger than Trevor Lawrence. They could grow up together, be a fantastic duo for the next decade plus.
I'm surprised nobody took a cornerback for the Jaguars.
I was gonna say Sauce Gardner, yeah,
or Pat Surtain.
Well, I have a reason for that, and it seems like the NFL has valued the wide receiver position far more than cornerback. It seems like if you have wide receivers, you can get by, or if you don't have elite cornerbacks, you can get by. If you don't have an elite wide receiver, it almost feels like you kind of need that to get that extra push, especially with a younger offense. So to me, that was sort of my logic there. Where Sauce Gardner would be great, but to me, they're not a Sauce Gardner away, but they could be a Justin Jefferson away.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair.
By the way, what's the over/under on Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb's AAV? Because I think it could start. I mean, we just saw Jalen Waddle get 84 million from the Dolphins. I mean, I have to think one, if not both, of CD and JJ might get 35 mil, 40.
Yeah, easy.
I could see up to 35 easily. 40 would be pushing it, but I mean, I wouldn't be shocked by that either. I mean, those are the two best in the league, so I could get it.
And they're both
George,
young.
I actually commented on your tweet, George, about the Jalen Waddle contract. I don't know if you saw that, but I said it's funny how that can be an overpay and a really good signing at the same time.
It's a great signing. I'm gonna do a video on it later, explaining why it's a great signing. But it's like none of that, not a penny of that kicks in until 2 years. And if you look at it, like Tyreek Hill is probably not going to be on the Dolphins in 2 years. So you're getting a true wide receiver one at like on average of $21 million a year. Like that's freaking unheard of. There's no way the Dolphins are paying Tyreek Hill $45 million in the last year of his contract or whatever it is, especially if they could save $30 million by cutting him. Like this, it's a phenomenal signing for both the player and the players. So, but that's another team. That's another team, so we'll talk about them later. We're here about Duval.
No state income tax helps because Water gets to keep more of his money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, guys. I think that's it. That's all the questions we have for you. But we greatly appreciate you guys coming on. Again, I want to tell everybody to reach out to Demetrius on the artist formerly known as Twitter. His handle is right there at the bottom. Demetrius Harvey at Demetrius82. He's a great follow on X, and then also on X we've got our man Dylan at Dylan's Sports One. Make sure you pluralize that Dylan there. I made that mistake trying to find him earlier. So that's Dylan's Sports One, the host of the Big D podcast. So again, thank you guys very much for coming on. We appreciate your time, and good luck to your Jaguars this year, but not too much luck.
I'll be cheering.
Absolutely, I appreciate you guys.
I'll be cheering the Jags on when they play the Colts. That's for sure.
Oh,
appreciate you guys.
As I wouldn't expect any less. All right. Have a great night, y'all.
Thank you.